This is not a scandal. This is a collapse. A slow, calculated, behind-closed-doors collapse that started years ago in a silent room in Kensington Palace and is now exploding across 3 continents at the exact same time. And if the documents, the leaks, and the financial trail are telling the truth, then what we are watching right now is not bad luck, not bad press, but the final stage of a very long game that has finally run out of moves. Because the real story does not begin in Hollywood. It does not begin in Australia. It begins in a quiet room with a tea set, a future king, and a moment that insiders say changed everything forever. November 2018. 4:15 p.m. Kensington Palace. A private meeting that was never supposed to become public knowledge. But according to the unedited investigative transcripts now circulating in publishing circles, that was the moment everything fractured. The moment when hierarchy, protocol, and royal order collided with something far more modern, far more aggressive, and far more dangerous to an institution built on silent power. The meeting was supposed to be about staff complaints, about tension, about behavior behind palace walls. But witnesses reconstructed in the file describe a moment that felt less like a meeting and more like a battlefield with no cameras, no recordings, just memory and power. And then the moment happened. The moment insiders say Prince William realized this was not a family disagreement anymore. This was a strategic war. Voices were raised. A hand was lifted to emphasize a point. And then a line was crossed that, according to palace staff, had never been crossed like that before. A finger pointed, a command delivered, a future king stunned into silence. And then something even more dangerous happened. He didn't fight back, he didn't argue, he didn't shout, he walked away. And insiders say that was the real beginning of the exile timeline, not the Oprah interview, not the documentaries, not the public statements, that room, that moment, that silence. Because from that point forward, the strategy reportedly changed inside palace walls. It was no longer integration, it was insulation. Files began forming, plans began forming. And while the world was still watching royal weddings and public appearances, the real decisions were being made quietly, methodically, and permanently. But while that silent war was being prepared in London, a very different operation was being built across the ocean. Fast forward to Australia, where what looked like a luxury empowerment retreat began to unravel into something that now looks, according to financial records and booking documents, like a financial time bomb waiting to explode. The pitch sounded perfect. Exclusive access, personal transformation, a royal presence. But the fine print told a very different story. Thousands of dollars per ticket, shared hotel rooms, massive markup. And behind the event, a financially desperate organizer drowning in debt and tax problems, allegedly relying on the royal brand to generate millions in advance ticket sales just to stay afloat. And here is where the story turns from gossip into something much darker, because according to the financial timeline, the money came in fast. Millions in pre-sales, deposits paid, venues booked. But when financial pressure hit and authorities started closing in on unpaid debts, something strange happened. Communication lines reportedly went silent, calls not returned, messages unread, and the entire situation began to look like a financial trap where one side could walk away clean while the other side took the legal fall. Now the situation has escalated beyond embarrassment. Complaints filed, legal threats, organizers claiming they were abandoned, authorities now involved, and the biggest question hanging over everything is simple and terrifying at the same time: who knew what and when? Because if recordings, contracts, or messages surface, this stops being a PR disaster and becomes something much more serious. But while Australia was exploding, Hollywood delivered what may have been the most devastating blow of all. Because in Hollywood, you can survive scandal, you can survive lawsuits, you can survive bad press, but there is one thing you cannot survive: industry silence. And that silence reportedly arrived in a glass boardroom at Netflix during contract negotiations, where insiders say the relationship finally collapsed behind closed doors. Executives frustrated, deals not renewed, projects frozen, and then the financial consequences started appearing in places no celebrity ever wants their brand to end up: liquidation lists and warehouse pallets. Because the lifestyle empire that was supposed to become a billion-dollar brand reportedly ended up as unsold inventory sitting in storage, with products being given away just to clear space. Not sold, not launched, not celebrated, given away. And when a company starts recording products as unrecoverable losses, that is not a branding issue anymore. That is a financial obituary. So now look at the full map of what is happening all at once. Australia, legal and financial pressure. Hollywood, corporate rejection and frozen deals. London, institutional silence and long-term consequences being prepared quietly. 3 continents, 3 crises, same timeline. And when multiple power structures that usually never cooperate suddenly move in the same direction at the same time, insiders said that is when you know the situation has moved beyond scandal and into something else entirely, something final. Because the final and most dangerous part of this entire story is not money, it is not reputation, it is not even Hollywood. It is the one thing that reportedly holds the entire structure together, the royal title itself. Because according to insiders and historical legal mechanisms, titles are not permanent, they are granted, and what is granted can be removed. And if that happens, then every deal, every contract, every brand built around that title suddenly loses the one thing that made it valuable in the first place. And that is why, behind all the headlines and all the drama, insiders say the real fear right now is not coming from Australia or Hollywood. It is coming from London, from old documents, old laws, old powers that do not move fast, but when they do move, they move permanently. Because if the title disappears, the brand disappears. If the brand disappears, the deals disappear. And if the deals disappear, then everything that was built after the royal exit starts collapsing like a house built on air. And that is why, according to people watching this unfold from inside media, inside finance, and inside palace circles, the next move will decide everything. Not a press release, not an interview, not a documentary, a move, a legal move, a financial move, or a royal move. But whatever happens next will not be small, and it will not be quiet, because too many people are now involved, too much money is now involved, and too many reputations are now tied to the outcome. And the most chilling part of all of this is that insiders say the end of this story may have actually started years ago in that silent room in Kensington Palace when one person walked out and chose silence instead of war. Because silence in institutions like that is not weakness, it is strategy. And now, years later, that silence is getting louder. And now the story moves into its most dangerous phase. Because what started as tension, then turned into distance, then turned into financial pressure, is now turning into something far more ruthless. Isolation. Not emotional isolation, institutional isolation, corporate isolation, social isolation. The kind of isolation that happens when doors don't just close quietly, they start locking one by one. Because while the public was still arguing online, still picking sides, still treating this like celebrity drama, something much more serious was happening behind the scenes. Calls were no longer being returned. Meetings were being postponed, then canceled. Invitations stopped coming. Deals stopped moving. And in Hollywood, when people stop taking your calls, that's not scheduling. That's a message, a very specific message. Inside Netflix, according to the investigation, the mood had reportedly shifted from partnership to containment, not collaboration, containment, because executives had allegedly reached the point where every meeting felt like a negotiation, every project felt like a risk, and every discussion felt like a power struggle that cost more money than it could ever make back. And that is when corporations start doing something very cold and very calculated. They don't attack, they don't argue, they don't make public scenes. They just slowly start cutting the financial oxygen. Projects delayed, budgets reduced, launches canceled, inventories frozen, warehouses filled with products that were supposed to be the beginning of a lifestyle empire, but instead became physical evidence of a deal that didn't work. Boxes stacked, labels peeling, products sitting. And the most brutal part of the entire situation, employees reportedly didn't even want the products when they were being given away for free. That's not just a business problem. That's a brand collapse in physical form. Because brands don't die when people criticize them. Brands die when people feel embarrassed to be associated with them. And according to insiders, that is exactly what started happening. The brand that was supposed to represent power, independence, and influence was now being whispered about in boardrooms as a financial liability. And once that word starts appearing in corporate reports, liability, the ending is usually already written. But while Hollywood was closing doors quietly, the situation in Australia was becoming loud, public, and legal. Because when money is involved, silence doesn't last long, especially when someone is facing bankruptcy, asset seizure, and possible criminal charges. Suddenly, documents start appearing, messages get saved, timelines get reconstructed, and people who were once business partners start using words like agreement, misrepresentation, and evidence, and this is where the story becomes a race. Not a race for fame, not a race for money, a race for narrative control. Because whoever controls the story controls the survival. One side trying to prove they were misled, the other side reportedly going silent, cutting communication, restructuring legal protection, and preparing for a scenario where the entire situation can be framed as someone else's mismanagement. This is what crisis managers call the burn strategy. When a situation becomes too dangerous to fix, you don't fix it, you distance yourself from it so completely that when it collapses, you're not standing near it anymore. anymore. And according to reports, that is exactly what started happening. Communication blackouts, legal walls, non-disclosure agreements, total silence. But while all of this chaos was happening in public and corporate spaces, the most terrifying development was happening in the one place that never moves fast but always moves last, the monarchy itself. Because unlike Hollywood, unlike PR firms, unlike event companies, the monarchy does not react emotionally. It reacts historically, slowly, legally, permanently. And according to the documents referenced in the investigation, there is an old legal mechanism that gives the sovereign the power to redefine who is officially royal and who is not. Not through interviews, not through arguments, through legal decree, through letters patent, through a process that does not require approval from Hollywood, public opinion, or social media. Only authority. And if that mechanism is ever used, then everything changes overnight. Titles gone, branding power gone, royal connection gone. And suddenly every contract, every business deal, every public identity built around that title becomes just another celebrity brand in a market already full of celebrity brands. And without the title, the entire financial structure reportedly loses its main selling point. Which brings us to the most human part of this entire story. The part no one wants to talk about but everyone is thinking about. The man in the middle of all of this. Because while businesses can collapse and brands can be rebuilt, bloodlines don't change. History doesn't change. And insiders say the real panic now is not about reputation. It's about permanent separation from the only institution that gave the brand its power in the first place. Because if the doors in London close permanently, they don't reopen with a phone call. They reopen with generations. And that is why people close to the situation say the next move will be the most aggressive move yet. Not a retreat, not silence. Something big, something public, something designed to force a reaction so massive that it resets the entire board. A book, an interview, a lawsuit, a leak, something that turns the entire story upside down. Because when someone feels cornered financially, socially, and institutionally at the same time, they don't usually walk away quietly. They pull everyone into the fire with them. And that is why insiders are calling this moment the most dangerous phase of the entire saga. Not the beginning, not the middle. The end game. Because in the end game, there are no more negotiations, only final moves. And if the leaks, the financial records, the corporate decisions, and the royal silence are all pointing in the same direction, what we are watching right now is not just a scandal anymore. It's a countdown.